This is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples' Truths. Justice for all. The most dangerous show on media anywhere. OCO, Taishu, Shadana Lai. I'm Winter Nightwolf, and this is the American Indian Indigenous Peoples' Truths. Justice for all, the most dangerous show on media anywhere. Before we kick off tonight's broadcast, I would like for everybody to join in and wish our sister, my close friend and co-host, Sandra Hope, a happy birthday. She's 39 again. Happy birthday, Sandra.
Much, I appreciate it.
I couldn't hear you.
I said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I heard you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I enjoyed my birthday yesterday, even though I didn't take the day off.
These guys
are
all here on the show tonight, and they're your brothers. So at the count of three, I want everybody to say happy birthday. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday.
Even Sheba got in on that one. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's get started. Some very close friends of mine and special guests tonight with us on this broadcast. And tonight we will discuss voter suppression in Indian country. This whole mess of all of these states that are trying to pass these laws to keep people of color, Black people, Native people, Latino people from voting in the upcoming election. This has been a fight since 1954, and it should have ended a long time ago. But we still have these racists, and I'm gonna call them just like it is, white folks that continue to walk around with this feeling of superiority. And you know what that really is? That just tells you how fragile they are, white fragility. I have nothing personal against white people, but I do have a problem with people trying to keep other people from exercising their rights, which is guaranteed in the US Constitution. So all of you Trumpers, Republican diehards, and idiots, you need to get yourselves together, because we will vote again and again and again if we have to take a carload of people with us miles to the polls. So this whole voter suppression thing is evil. There's no other word to describe it other than it's evil. So let's get started. We have my good friend and my brother, member of my tribe, the Cherokee Nation, Judge Don Walker, with news from Indian country. Take it away, Don.
Thank you, Jay. I've got some great news tonight. Some really interesting, good news for you. The IAIA's Museum of Contemporary Native American Arts leaps ahead Wednesday, July 14th. NativeAmericaCalling.com. The IAIA Museum of Contemporary Native American Arts in Santa Fe just received its largest donation ever. The $3 million unrestricted donation, pick up on that keyword unrestricted, donation comes from Mackenzie Scott and her husband Dan Jewett and was among the 286 gifts to help change the narrative about people struggling against the inequities. The gift follows a $1.7 million grant from the Ford Foundation in 2020. Next up here, Jay, NCAI President Sharp on 1 year anniversary of the retirement of the Washington football team name and imagery. Source, the National Congress of American Indians. The following is a statement from Fawn Sharp, President of the National Congress. On the 1 year anniversary of the Washington football team's retirement of their racist mascot, we take a moment to recognize the grit and dedication of tribal nations, tribal leaders, citizens, advocates, and allies who tirelessly helped in the mission to educate Americans on the immense harms Native-themed mascots and team names cause Native people. Last year sparked a wave of momentum, and in 2020 alone, a total of 70 schools voted to retire or alter their Native-themed mascots, with more than 30 schools following suit in 2021. Thus far, on the state level, several states have fully or partially banned Native-themed or race-based mascots, including the home state of Washington. This growing movement shows no signs of slowing down. True respect for Native people and other people of color requires our country to rid itself of the symbols of racism, intolerance that have far too long been embedded in popular culture, which have marginalized and dehumanized us. These symbols and names have no place in American society, and our work is not yet done. NCAI will not rest until all offensive Native-themed mascots and associated imagery are removed from popular culture. And we call upon our partners and allies across the nation to join us in our resolve to push this positive momentum forward. The National Congress launched a comprehensive national tracking database that tracks more than 24 different Native-themed school mascots in use by K-12 public schools across the country and continues actively engage and educate those schools deliberating the retirement of their mascots. Jay, is something interesting to think about on this. We have vilified, created genocide, tried to wipe out, claimed they didn't exist, didn't own anything, Native Americans. Yet when it comes to strength, a warrior spirit, ability to fight, it seems that we want to be associated with Native Americans. And I cite the example, what's the military going to do with the Apache helicopter? They're going to rename it to Mother Goose, and you've got the Tomahawk cruise missile. I think that ought to be considered too. Maybe they're going to change that to the pea shooter. But we're not all on that same page. There are some valuable things out there, and you're offended if you want to be offended. That's all I had to add on that one. We got another one here for you, Jay. Looks like the future will not be hairy Monday, July 12, 2021. What they're talking about is Native American hair. And I'm going to try to get this up on the screen and let you get a look at this. This is a picture taken in the Cherokee Museum in Cherokee, North Carolina, just a few years ago, depicting 3 warriors. These are life-size warriors in there. Take a look at their hairstyles. You don't see Tonto in there, do you? Just for fun, I'll tell you, the third one's me on the left. But it's interesting that we stereotype our Native Americans is all black hair and braided. When I was a boy in Rapid City, the only bald-headed men I saw were white men. Eventually, my mom took us down to the res to visit relatives. There were some old men sitting in the shade at Sharp's Corner. All had hair so thin you could see their scalps, and one of them was actually bald. That made me think about old photographs of famous chiefs, and a lot of them having something covering their head, like a war bonnet. That's a good chance some of these men were bald. Lots of Lakota guys I grew up with are getting thin on top, me included. Although we'll probably never go completely bald, male pattern baldness is far more common among white males. My friend Barry barely made it out of high school before his hair started falling out. I used to tease him. He was easy to spot in grade school because he was the only kid in the playground with a receding hairline. A bust of Frank Foolscrow, a Lakota leader who lived from 1890 to 1989. This other kid I knew, Mike, boy, did he have a thick head of hair he was seriously vain about. He grew it long down to his shoulders, and he had this cool hallway walk at North Junior High where he would toss his wild mane to the extent any chicks dug him. They dug him because of that cool hair. Frank Foolscrow testified before Congress in 1976. He wrote something on his head. He wore something on his head resembling hair. I don't recall it a toupee or even a wig. It was like some black yarn was knitted into braids and slapped on his head. It looked awful, but not as bad as showing up in Washington with a bald head when you're supposed to be all tribal and traditional. There again, we're stereotyping Native Americans as to all look like Tonto. And I guess we've been watching too many old Westerns on TV with John Wayne and so forth. He was a warrior, and he made do best as he could in a bad situation. But that poor guy, Mike, I mentioned earlier, being white, his cool hair was pure vanity. A couple years after high school, I saw him coming out of a restaurant. Still had his cool walk. Hair was down to his shoulders, but the top of his head was completely bald. Ben Franklin would have taken second place in a Ben Franklin look-alike contest if Mike had entered. That concludes news, Jay. I hope it's informative.
That was great. That was great. Your commentaries are just on time all the time. And I'm so proud to have you, not just my brother, but my friend too. Don Walker, thank you so much. Okay, I can't stop smiling from that one. Sandra?
I'm still thinking of the Mother Goose helicopter. That's going to be stuck.
And the pea shooter, right? And Ben Franklin. Okay, well, let's get started with a nice program. We're off to a good start. Everybody's smiling. I don't know whether you'll be smiling by the time this is over. Can we bring everybody up on the screen? Okay.
Ain't nothing wrong with long hair.
No. Pete still got his. I got mine. See? But I am receding here, though. Tonight, we're talking about voter suppression in Indian country, but actually is more than just Indian country. The right to vote has been an uphill battle for Native Americans. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 helped to secure and protect the right of many Native Americans and Alaska Natives. With the Voting Rights Act, voter participation among Native Americans increased. However, the Supreme Court invalidated the Section 5 formula in 2013, Shelby County versus Holder, 570 U.S. 529, 2013, removing one of the most powerful tools to ensure equal access to the ballot box, including Arizona and Alaska, and 2 jurisdictions in South Dakota. with significant Native American and Alaska Native populations. Since the Shelby County decision, efforts to suppress the vote have increased for Native Americans. These voter suppression efforts can and do have devastating effects. I remember Representative John Lewis making a statement, "The right to vote is precious. It's almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in a democracy."
Yeah, and this
John
Saturday
Lewis,
is the 1-year anniversary of his passing.
right. And John Lewis, he says it's okay to get into a good fight with good trouble. Despite the passage of the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, many Native Americans living on reservations continue to be excluded from the democratic process. In 1948, Native Americans in New Mexico and Arizona successfully litigated their right to vote. Utah and North Dakota became the last states to afford on-reservation Native Americans the right to vote in 1957 and 58, respectively. When the right to vote was finally secured, voter suppression laws kept Native Americans from voting and seeking elected office. And it goes on and on and on. I remember when President Barack Obama was on the campaign trail the first time, and he went to South Dakota. I happened to be there, working with to get out the vote for him. But it is some nasty mess that they do to Native people, as if they're trying to get rid of the last of us. Ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna happen.
Look at our
They
amazing
set up
guests today, Jay.
Hmm?
Look at those amazing faces of our amazing guests.
Okay, well, let me finish. Let me finish what I was saying. Anytime you have to drive 50 miles into town just to go to a ballot, to a voting booth, anytime you drive a car full of your people to town and they want to classify it in some states as unlawful, anytime in the sweltering heat of sometimes 120, 130 degrees, people out there about to faint, and you bring water and give them water, they want to charge you, they want to arrest you. This is racism. And if you can't see that, then something's wrong with you. You need to go see an eye doctor. We have the right to vote, and I don't give a damn what anybody says. It's in the Constitution. It's been passed through Congress many different times, but you got these old Southern crazy white folks that think that if they don't have the say-so on everything, then it's not right. I wonder what would happen if all of a sudden blacks and Indians became in charge of this government and wouldn't allow them to vote. You see a different side of the story. Okay, so what were you saying, Sandra?
Well, I was just saying, we got Joel Siegel, we got Mark Charles, we've got Pete Landeros, and we've got Gray Owl, and amazing guests that all have a wealth of information about our topic tonight.
Okay, so let me.
And look, they're anxious. Look at them.
You guys should have gone and got some chicken to eat first before they came on the show because they all look hungry. All right, let me start with my brother Joel Siegel, who's my brother from another mother. I've known him over 35 years now, Joel.
Yeah.
Damn, we that old?
Yes, with that old.
Joel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Joel Siegel, happy birthday, Sandra.
Thank you so much.
One of my favorite people. I love you like my sister, and happy birthday, many more.
Thank you.
Very briefly, I'm Joel Siegel, been an activist for 40 years. Worked for Congressman John Conyers for about 13 as his speechwriter, senior legislative assistant, and I was the lead staffer on the Affordable Care Act and Medicare for All. And I continue my organizing and activism, outside of Congress.
Thank you, Joel.
Welcome.
I see my other brother all the way from Dene, Mark Charles. Mark Charles actually ran as an independent in the last election. Mark, tell us a little bit about you, where you're from.
Hey, Yate Joe, or Yate Jay, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me on today. Let me just introduce myself. So, Mark Charles Yinishya, Sin Bake Dene initially, the Tohiglini Bashis Chin, Sin Bake Dene Dasha Chedo to the Chini Dashanella. As you know, us Navajos, when we introduce ourselves, we always give our 4 clans. And so I have to introduce both my mother and my father's parents. And so my mother's mother is American of Dutch heritage. And so I say, Sin Bake Dene, I'm coming from the wooden shoe people. My father's clan, my father's mother, my second clan is Tohiglini, the waters that flow together. My third clan, my mother's father, is also Sin Bake Dene. And then my fourth clan, my father's father, is Totachitni, and that's the Bitterwater clan. It's one of the original clans of our Navajo people. I'm also just want to acknowledge, we're here in D.C. and these are the land of the Piscataway, and I'm honored to be to acknowledge them as the hosts of these lands. And it's a privilege to be living on these lands. I've taken these past few months to watching the sunrise again, going down to the Potomac and watching the sun come up, much like I would imagine many of the Piscataway people have done for probably centuries. And it has been transformative for my living here in the DC area, to get connected to the land by watching the sunrise come up over the river. It's a life-changing experience. I'm so deeply grateful for their stewardship of these lands and for the opportunity to live in the beauty of these lands today.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Next, we got the man in the straw hat.
Gray Owl.
My brother, David Gray Owl.
Well,
Hey,
thank
Dave,
you for
how you
having me
doing?
on the. Thank you for having me on the show. My name is David Carnes, commonly known as Gray Owl. I am the president of Native Opinion Inc., producer and co-host of the internet radio show Native Opinion. I produce and host a show called Food, Water, and Air, a podcast. And I am the vice president, I should say, and chief financial officer of Saving the Circle. So my
Absolutely.
plate is quite full. I live in the land of the Calusas and the Seminoles primarily. And I've been in Southwest Florida now for 15 years. And Jay keeps threatening to come steal my fruit. So
It's not a threat. Don't wake up tomorrow morning and you have no grapefruits on your trees.
But I'm honored to be here with all of you. I've met most of you in one shape, form, or fashion. Peter, I haven't met you yet, but I'm glad to have met you this evening. We'll talk more. And I look forward to having conversations with all of you at some point.
Okay. Next of all, Big Pete Landeros, my nephew. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Thank you for having me, Jay. Happy birthday. And Mark was right that we're on Piscataway land, and I want to give them the props. That's where we're at. I am a Pasquayaki Indian from southern Arizona. My family is part of the Deer Clan down there. I grew up in this area in D.C. because my parents moved me here in '73 in the Baltimore area, and I've been here ever since. My mother and father were involved in American Indian movement since its conception. They were part of the takeover of the BIA building. They helped bring supplies to Wounded Knee and to another faction that happened up in upstate New York. I can't think of that name right now. But a couple years ago, the thought came to me and wouldn't leave that I had to bring the American Indian movement back into this area and let people see that we're still here and we're still strong. And that's what I've been doing as a director of American Indian Movement Woodland Territory.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for being here with us tonight. I see we got a lot of comments from a lot of people already. People from Chicago, Dustin Stevenson, Marina Hernandez. How are you tonight, sis? All the way from Houston, Texas. She's watching. We got Elizabeth Knight, who's watching us in Illinois. We just got people all over the globe watching. So thank you all for your support. This whole issue of voter suppression, I'm going to let my brother, Joel Siegel, start off with this mess.
Well, the states of what I call the new Confederacy, mainly Southern and Midwestern states, kind of a new white nationalist, authoritarian, successionist movement, have passed laws all over the country since the passage of a Supreme Court case. It's called Shelby versus Holder. What Shelby versus Holder did is it took the guts out of the 1965 Civil Rights Act, which had protected theoretically Native Americans for decades. The marches of the civil rights movement in the 60s and Martin King's advocacy was to pass the 64 and the 1965 Civil Rights Act. In Montana, there was a Democratic governor named Stephen Bullock, was defeated by Greg Gianforte. I didn't want to announce his name, but I have to. He's kind of the Donald Trump of Montana. They passed two bills. I don't want to go into too much detail about the bills, but one bill outlaws 24-hour voting and same-day registration. The other, which is very evil, makes it illegal for people to distribute or collect mail-in ballots if they're being paid to do so. And as many of you know, in the Native American community, there are a lot of people who don't have access to transportation. And also a lot of reservations, they don't have addresses. So these laws are being passed for one reason, to make sure that the Native American community does not vote. If you look at the election of Tester, Senator Tester of Montana, his margin of victory was due to the Native American vote.
That's right.
And there's been an increase, about a 10% increase in the Native American vote, which is the largest of, I don't like to use the word minority. I am a minority as well, but I don't like the word, but that's what the statistics say. So this is all about one thing and one thing only, and that's for Republicans to stay in power, because they know with the increasing voter participation of Native Americans, blacks, and students, the only way they can stay in power and win is by illegal Jim Crow voter suppression.
Yes.
And I hope what we'll do tonight is also talk about not what's just the problem, but what are we going to do about it?
Yes. Absolutely. Mark Charles, you are very familiar with this thing because you were actually running in the last presidential election.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on this?
So there are two things I want to say here, Jay. And you know me, I always like to bring this down to the foundational level. We do have these laws being passed that are happening mostly in southern states, our conservative states around the country. But this voter suppression, this goes all the way down to the foundations and even to the construction of the Electoral College. You know, my nation, the Navajo Nation, we're 27,000 square miles. We're now the largest tribe. We're 400,000 enrolled tribal members. We surpassed the Cherokee during COVID because we had so many people registering with our tribe during COVID-19. And we don't have access to a single electoral college vote within our Navajo Nation. Because we're in the Four Corners area, we have land in southeast Utah, northeast Arizona, and northwest New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And we don't have control of a single congressional district in all of that land, which means we have less influence on the Electoral College. And not only do we have the largest number of enrolled members, we have the largest reservation. Most reservations are very small compared to ours. And so because the Native vote has been so spread out and so marginalized, even when we do vote and these laws make it harder, we actually have a minimal impact on the Electoral College because of how spread out our vote is. So we have to first acknowledge this Constitution was never written to make sure we had access to voting. But the other thing I want to bring into this, because the narrative around these, and we've been hearing it for the past 6 months, that the bad Republicans are trying to take away the vote of marginalized communities. And that's absolutely true. And that is what they're trying to do. But we have to remember it takes two to tango. And the two-party system, the Democrats and the Republicans, work together to maintain the status quo. So the Republicans hate voters, right? They have a very conservative, very white supremacist base that's not growing. So the more people who vote, the less likely a Republican candidate is to win. So they work hard to make sure people have a hard time voting, and they're doing that with these laws. The Democrats hate competition. They have a much more diverse base, but they always nominate white landowning men from the 1%, or a majority of the time. And so then when they get to the general election, they're afraid their base is going to wander. So they are working hard to keep other candidates, third-party independent candidates, from running. And so I want to just point out something about what the Democrats are doing in their response to what the Republicans are doing, which is this voter suppression. And the Democrats are working on a law called the For the People Act. And in this law, so in the 1970s, when they first began passing voter reform after the civil rights movement, there was one of the sections of the law that said, and I want to read this so I get it exactly, the National Committee of a political party may not make any expenditure in connection with the general election campaign of any candidate for president of the U.S. who is affiliated with such party which exceeds an amount equal to 2 cents multiplied by the voting age population of the country. So in other words, the two major parties can donate 2 cents for every age eligible voter in the country to their general election candidate. In 2020, that amounted to about $5 million that the Republican Party could give to Donald Trump and the Democratic Party could give to Joe Biden. Okay? So that was over and above their other contributions. The party could give that directly to those candidates. In the For the People Act, they amend that section of the law, and this is what they say. The National Committee of a political party may not make any expenditure in connection with the general election campaign of any candidate for president of the United States who is affiliated with such party, which exceeds $100 million. In other words, the two parties can now donate directly to their general election candidates $100 million. That's $95 million than they were able to donate in 2020. So this will absolutely increase the advantage that the two-party candidates have over third-party independent candidates who are trying to run in the race. Not only because it gives such a large amount, but the parties can solicit donations different than the candidates can. The candidates have a limit of $2,800 per individual. A party can have a donation up to $35,000 annually. So immediately, everybody who's now maxed out their contribution directly to their candidate can now donate $35,000 to the party, and the party can donate that directly to the candidate. Mm-hmm. And so you have to remember, it takes two to tango to suppress democracy. The Republicans are trying to suppress the vote of minority people, and the Democrats are working to clear the competition, clear the field, so that only their white landowning men from the 1% can have the nomination. So that's the only option people have to vote for. Both parties are working to really rip the heart out of our democracy and to suppress not only the vote of people of color, but the people of color who are trying to run, who know our message will never fit in to the two-party system.
That's a lot.
And what's funny is nobody is talking about this. Mm-hmm. Nobody in all of the chatter going on, both on the Republican and the Democratic side, nobody is talking about this amendment to that law that is written into the For the People Act.
Once this is exposed, what's happening is the king will have no more clothes. So that's why. David Grayal, your thoughts on
What Mark just shared with us is absolutely correct. The American people have had candidates shoved down their throats forever. Joel and I have talked on occasion about the amounts of money, as Mark alluded to, that candidates can raise to stock their war chest. The American people have no war chest. We have no way to choose the candidates that we would like to see. The parties more often are choosing the candidates that they want us to vote for. Mark is an exception. Mark ran as an independent candidate. He wasn't chosen by either dominant party, and we need to have more candidates like that. There are nonprofit organizations out there called super PACs and other political PACs that people donate to, but their idea of what they're donating to is manipulated to support the agendas of the two parties Mark mentioned, the Democrats and the Republicans. I founded an organization called WhyThisMatters.org. It's a super PAC. I'm going to be upfront. It's a super PAC, but it's a super PAC for the people. It's a way for the people to have their war chest, to choose the candidates that they would like to see running instead of someone saying, this is who you're going to vote for. That's not democracy. That is not democracy. When people are able to position someone, I'll use Mark as an example, as their candidate to run against the dominant parties, then you have a horse race. That is democracy. But without a war chest, the people are being manipulated, as we've always been, within our political system. So until the people wake up and decide enough is enough, the status quo is going to remain the status quo. Mark, I thank you for running. I'm sorry you didn't win, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome. I honestly mean that. There was a lot that you brought to the table that was beneficial to the American people, and the parties in power did everything they could to keep your ideas from making it in the limelight. That's sad.
Yeah,
Organizations
yeah.
like WhyThisMatters.org makes those opportunities available, but we have to, as Joel has said, come together as one to make this happen.
Okay.
You can't be splintered in groups pushing agenda 1 through 55 and expect something to happen. Everyone has to be on the same page to some degree for some traction to be gained.
Absolutely.
And until that happens, we're just kind of, blowing in the wind.
Okay. Thank you, David.
You're welcome,
Pete.
sir.
Sir. Okay.
Instead of old man, he said sir. So,
Yeah. Well, I know where he lives.
Okay.
Pete, coming from the family that you came from, of organizers, of people that stood up for what was right, what are your thoughts on this mess? Because it is
It is a mess. One of the things I learned from my family and my mentors in the American Indian movement and my elders is that we can't do anything by ourselves. We have to have us as a group to be able to stand strong, one nation, one tribe. And that's very hard to do because the colonial way of thinking has really influenced a lot of Native American people, indigenous people, and the way that they think of things. Just a couple weeks ago, last weekend at Cherokee a powwow, a good friend of mine was denied the chance to dance, and he's Lumbee. And because he's a Lumbee Indian, he's not Indian enough to dance at the Cherokee National Powwow.
Well, what the hell is Indian?
Lewis.
Yeah.
And it's that type of attitude that's going to keep us where we're at. It's that type of attitude that's never going to allow us to move forward. To steal something that Mark Charles used to say, we the people needs to mean we the people. And yes, Mark, I'm sad that you didn't win. I did vote for you.
Thank you.
And those words need to ring true, irregardless of skin color, religious background, and irregardless of whether you're the 1% richest people in the country. Because the one thing these people supposed in power have forgotten is they're supposed to do what's best for the people and not what's best for their pockets and the top 1%. Also, a lot of tribal governments have forgotten it's what's best for the people and not what's best for their pockets and their status of who they are. My father told me one time, if you get into AIM because you want to be famous and rich, you're in the wrong end of the stick. You're there to better the people and not yourself. If you can better the people, that means you're bettering yourself. If you're just bettering yourself and not the people, then you're not doing the work you're supposed to do. And that's one thing the federal government has never done, is what's best for the people. Like Jay said, we didn't get full voting rights until 58. Come on, we weren't even considered citizens of this country until 1942. Mm-hmm. And all these states are passing bills where if you don't have an existing address, a P.O. box doesn't work anymore and you can't vote. I know the reservation that I'm from, there's thousands of people that have P.O. boxes. I know up in North Dakota, over 5,000 people couldn't vote in the 2020 election because they had P.O. boxes.
Yes.
That's a lot of people.
South Dakota as well. Yeah.
And the same thing with Mark's people. They don't have physical addresses. It's a joke amongst Native American people. When you give directions, you go down to the tree that's got the rope hanging in it, and then you see the little tumbleweeds and you make the left. That's the way the reservations are set up. There are no, I live at 8010 Indian Way in Southern Arizona. It's a P.O. box, and that's just wrong. If they want to hold true to what the Constitution says, that we the people, that's what it needs to mean, and not just a selective few who have the money.
Mm-hmm. This whole thing of colonization, when they came over here, they didn't come here as anything aristocratic from Europe. They were being chased out of Europe by the crowned heads of Europe. So, and they got here and they said, oh my God, we're victims, we're here, what can we do? And shortly after that, we became their victims. So I know in some of this dialogue tonight, I've heard responses of what we should do. But let me go to a man that's been organizing for 35, 40 years and been in the political movement for that long. Joel Siegel, what do we have to do? What in the hell do we have to do? Or what can we do?
Well, I think we're going to have to probably organize some kind of a national strategy meeting with some of the people who are on this broadcast and come up with a campaign to fight back. Mr. Representative Conyers, who I used to work for, used to say, you got to punch these people in the nose and you can't be so nice to them. I think we should occupy the governor's office. We got to get into good trouble. If we occupy Wall Street, why can't we occupy the governor's office until however long it takes to change those voter suppression laws. It's not going to be a sprint; it's going to be a marathon. But sometimes you got to go to jail, you know. So I paid $50. I organized a protest with a lot of activists when McConnell, the turtle himself, Senator McConnell, the Republican turtle, was going to destroy Obamacare that I worked for most of my life. And for 3 days, we blocked his office. We got arrested. I paid my $50. I got out. Number two, I think we should have national call-in days to flood the governor's office with calls so they will not be able to work. This is a technique that I used to employ very well when no one knew that I was doing it, working at Congress. Third, I think that we're also going to have to boycott any businesses that give money to the Montana Republican Party. Hit them where it counts, in the pocketbook. And that's, you know, it starts with a national strategy meeting, invite all people, because it's going to happen all over the country. We've got to start somewhere. Thanks.
And you know something else too, Joel? I'm looking at what's happening in Texas now, where all of the congressional members left the state to keep the Republicans from running this mess, this crap through voter suppression laws. And we need to support them, because they have somehow they woke up and they smell the coffee. So I think more of these types of and the other thing, Joe, whatever hell happened to what we used to do in the 60s and the 70s? Whatever happened to that? Where's the backbone anymore? I mean, we would protest, we would march, and just do a sit down and go into congressional members' offices and just sit down until they came out and spoke to us.
Those are the tactics we're going to have to employ, or else this country is quickly moving to fascism and white nationalism. If we continue with the Electoral College, we can get another fascist like Trump. The Electoral College, as everyone who studied Electoral College, was basically used to stop civil rights legislation from being passed. But we cannot use the same tactics, what I call click activism, where you click your mouse or you wait for Rachel Maddow, who I love. She's not a organizer. She's a really good political pundit. We're going to have to remember AIM and SNCC and SDS and the Chicano movements.
Yep.
And study Black and Brown history and replicate that now. But we cannot do it in our silos. We have to unify.
Re-employ those tactics. Re-employ those tactics. My friend, my nephew up in Pennsylvania, you know, he says, "I'm not afraid of jail. Let's move." You know, if it takes going to jail, I mean, take the example of Dr. Martin Luther King. And it may not always be nonviolent, because some of these fools out there, they're going to bring violence to your doorstep. And you got to be able to repel that. I mean, hell, they hung black people all throughout the South, all the way up to the 1970s. You know, so death is nothing to be afraid of. Not for me, because I know my life will end at some point. But what's going to make a difference is what I do from the time I get here until the time I leave. What I do for humanity. That's the most important thing. We got to leave our kids, our grandkids, and our friends that are younger than us. We got to leave them with something so that they can continue the work that we need to do.
I like what Steve is saying. He talked with NICWA, National Indian Child Welfare Act, about CASE, and that the application of such to ensure the Indian children stay connected. And he said, it's not happening.
No, it's not.
Get in the street, get loud. You know, that's what we got to do.
Sandra, too many of our people have sold out. They're sellouts. You know.
May I say something?
You can say anything you want to say. Go right ahead.
Excuse me.
Go ahead, Reverend.
They're loud, Gray Owl.
Thank you. Well, to get to the root of the problem from where I'm sitting, the protests, the marches, the sit-ins are all necessary. But as long as we keep putting the same politicians back in office,
Yeah. Yeah.
the fight becomes much more difficult. There has to be some sort of check and balance on those politicians, because there is none now, and we know that, to limit the damage that they can do in the short amount of time that they should be there. And I'm speaking of term limits. We have to start positioning candidates that will believe in term limits, that we can hold accountable to cast votes for term limits, and cut the problem off at the knees, because that's where the problem exists. We can, talk about all of the things that we need to do, and they're all important. But as long as we're fighting against the same candidates, the same lawmakers, who do you think is going to keep winning?
You're right.
Sure, we may have small battles that we've won here and there, but that's not going to win the day. We have to start positioning candidates that are going to say, sure, I believe that term limits are necessary. We should give candidates, 2 terms, 3 terms at the most. And then we can start to see some substantial change, some concrete change, and put an end to things like voter suppression and, all of this other nonsense, because nobody's going to be entrenched long enough to allow these roots to grow, to allow these things to happen. These are things I believe that have to happen. Otherwise, we're fighting uphill.
Brandon, take over. I'll be right back.
All right, Jay. Thank you, Gray Owl. I think we agree. Don, you had some. I think you have some strong opinions about this.
You think so? All right.
I think you're eager.
I believe in collective bargaining and protest. I believe in these things to facilitate change. But until we eliminate on both sides all violence, all larceny, all looting, until we eliminate these things, we're not getting the credibility of the majority of the American population. You can be on either side of this argument, but as soon as you start doing those things, moderates out there are saying, I don't want any part of you, you're going to burn people down. That's not the way to resolve anything. We needed, MLK would be aghast at the violence going on out there. And I think both sides need to address this. And anybody that insists on getting into looting or burning or weapons or what have you, be put out entirely from these organizations. Carry them off and put them out in the state, out in the park outside of town. But we need this situation to arise before we can all come together and go in a mass protest to get something to happen with the government. They've got to have respect for us. Those people, they're not only the government, but the moderates on both sides, have no respect for us when we do things like that. Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, I think, there are some people who get to the point where they feel like there is no alternative, that nothing else they do is going to work. And so the key thing to me, and I think it's what everybody is saying, we need to unite. We need to be in unity. We need to define what we're going after and how we're going to get there. And, we need to be willing to get into the street and even get arrested. But we don't need to throw rocks at buildings or, set things on fire. If we, if enough people shut down the streets of DC peacefully and in unity, they will have to do something. Somebody will have to recognize something and start.
I agree with that. I agree that's the course that we need to follow. And maybe out of desperation, these folks are saying, well, I can't get it to happen any other way, so I'm going to go burn down somebody's business. And, that business person, they're not thinking about that. That's that person's kid's baseball uniform, his lifetime contribution, every penny he's probably got, his vacation coming up. They're not thinking about that. And they're using it as a weapon to try to get more recognition for their cause, and I say they're getting less.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joel.
There are more progressives than there are non-progressives. Biden won by 7 million votes. The Black Lives Matter protest were multiracial. We have got to get used to the idea that we are now in the majority. We cannot whisper, we must roar. If we don't unite, we're going to lose Mother Earth to climate change. The West is burning. 7 million homeless, 45 million about to be evicted. Native American people won't be able to vote, or they'll try not to, the right wing. So I ask this question: what are we waiting for? It's not up to the politicians, it's up to us. I'm sick and tired of watching the far right wing, the 1%, rich white men, put the whole country and the world down. We got to fight back, but we are now in the majority. In 2045, America will be majority minority country. We've got to find our own voice and our own power. Thanks.
I couldn't agree with you more, Joe. Mark Charles, go ahead, Pete.
No, Mark, you look like you got something to say. Go ahead.
He's pondering.
Well, as far as the question of what do we do now, right? So I'm working very hard at the moment to help people understand what the root of the problem is. The challenge is that we fall into this narrative so often that the Republicans are bad, the Democrats are good, and we're fighting for that. And we have to get our people to recognize that the two-party system is what's keeping us in this oppressed state.
Yes.
I was so distraught when I watched Deb Haaland's confirmation hearings online. Mm-hmm. I love Deb Haaland. I when she ran for Congress and she was at Standing Rock and she talked about keeping oil in the ground and she was against fracking and all these other things. And she had to walk back all of those comments in her confirmation hearing. Not because the Republican senators were trying to get them to align with their thinking, but because they wanted to make sure she aligned with Joe Biden's thinking. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden, the president she is serving, is not against fracking. Joe Biden, the president she's serving, is not against big oil. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden, the president. So she had to walk back all of her fantastic positions, not because of the Republicans, but because they weren't in line with the president she was serving as the secretary for. And this is what the challenge is when we have one party that is explicitly racist and sexist and the other party that's implicitly racist and sexist, and they both work to maintain the status quo. So I'm doing everything I can right now to help our people understand that it's not one side's good, the other side's bad. They both are working in partnership to keep the status quo going forward, and the status quo is racism, sexism, and white supremacy. And so we have to understand what it is we are struggling against. We're not struggling against the Republicans. We're struggling against the two-party system, which was set up to keep white landowning men in power from both sides of the aisle.
So how do you get rid of a weed in the garden? You pull it up by the roots.
Mm-hmm. What I was going to say is this. The American Indian movement has been known for some strong arm tactics in the past. And if you know the true history of what happened at those incidents, we were defending ourselves and our people.
Yes.
Okay. At Wounded Knee, at the takeover of the BIA building. That whole BIA building fiasco is a story we can do at another time, but and the same thing with the Wounded Knee and the other violent factions that AIM in the past has been involved in. American Indian movements never back down, and we never will. We're here for the long fight, irregardless. Each step we take forward as a people is a victory. And I will say this again and again and again. One tribe, one nation.
One people.
Okay. One people, if we're going to make this change. Okay. We as people of color outnumber the ruling class 5-1. Why are they still in power? Because they keep us divided and not together. Okay. So if we're going to do this, it's going to take a grassroots movement to put away the ignorant feelings towards each other. You know, to make a joke of it. Mark's from northern Arizona. I'm from southern Arizona. We don't like each other. But that's not true. You know, to put away those childish ignorance that have creeped up on us as people, the indigenous people of this continent have to go away. We have to find common ground to fight for this so that we have a voice and to hold our people who are supposed to be our leaders accountable for what they do and they don't do. And I agree with term limits 100%, because you got people in the Congress and in the Senate have been in there forever and have never changed the way that they think. They just sugarcoat it a little bit to please everybody, and they just go about the same BS they've been doing since they started. So, and if the people aren't doing what we put them in the power before, get rid of them. It's somebody else's chance to do what we're supposed to do.
You know what bothers me, Pete, is, you know, all of our white brothers and sisters that are all affected by all of these same things that black folks and Indians are affected by. Why the hell aren't they saying something?
Because they're brainwashed. The majority of your Trump voters and people are very low income, very I don't know how to say it, but they're brainwashed to the colonial way of thinking. White is right, white is bright, and white is what's supposed to be, and that's it. And I got news for you. That's not this country anymore. And if that's what we want everything to become, is to show that the people of color have the power, then the only way that's going to happen is if all the tribes unite to stand up and fight. All the African Americans, Black Americans, whatever they call themselves, stand up together and fight. All the Latinos, or whatever, if that's what you want to call them. I call them my brothers and sisters, irregardless of skin tone. Okay. And that's the only way this is going to happen. Education, like Mark is saying, teach the people, and they have to be willing to learn. Even though I'm 53 years old, I learn something new every day, and I'm thank the Creator for it every chance that I get. So, and that's the attitude we have to move better forward as a people.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you. I think we're where are we on the clock? We're out of time, right?
We're gonna Leslie said we can extend another 15 or so.
All right. Okay. So thank you, boss.
It's my birthday.
It was a comment. Somebody submitted a comment a little while ago. It was a long comment, and it made sense. It was about if the post office can collect mail. And geez, Leslie, I don't know what happened to it. Do you still have that one on this lady made about why can't the post office serve as the place that you go and register to vote? And they do the verification on who you are. It says, it's from Jane Sullivan. It says, if they can collect money for a box to receive mail,
Right.
that carries regulations and has their own federal branch that oversees and prosecutes obey laundering and other federal crimes using the mail, why can they not be a first point of contact to verify ID with the local municipality and issue and verify that ID? That makes a lot of sense because everybody,
It's too easy.
I know it's too easy, but But then
No, because also with these state laws, because if you have a PO box, they're not going to give you a valid ID.
well, I think that should be wiped out, because states are the biggest drawback to people wanting to vote. Because, oh, well, I don't like that law, so maybe we should control it. Control what? What you've been controlling since the beginning of time? Why can't the U.S. Postal Service be in the position when they accept a fee for the mailbox, be the position to verify local addresses?
Like Route 101. Yeah.
Yeah, right,
When I was growing up in North Carolina, we didn't have streets. We had rural routes and boxes. And at some point they decided, well, no, everybody's got to have a street. So then we had to choose a street name and they assigned numbers and all of that. But even before that, we had legal documents that had our rural route and box.
Well, you know what? And I think not only that, but we should also have all of the DMVs, the motor vehicle registration places. They should have authority to do it as well. I know when you get a driver's license now, you get the real ID. And I'm saying, hell, I already got a real ID. So in order to travel, you got to have this real ID. But they never talk about the laws that we already had in place, the treaty laws like the J Treaty that the Mohawks have. They can go anywhere in the world as long as they show their tribal ID. Okay.
I think, Jay, one thing, everything that everyone is saying, they are absolute, concrete, valid things that need to happen. But for me, somebody like me, I spend most of my day behind the computer. And I know me sitting behind the computer is not going to do much in terms of making this change. Like everybody's talking about, we need to get in good trouble. I think, like for me, and I'm sure for a lot of our listeners, it would be very beneficial, valuable to have an absolute itemized list of the things that we need to do, the things we need to take action on, the things that we can go down that list and say, okay, I can go to that address on that date and I can sit in the street, or I can bring a sign, or I can, write a letter to the congressman or whatever, what have you. I think we need specifics that will help us just be able to choose things where we can have a big, big impact in unity.
Basically, we need to take the lesson from Dick Gregory. He said, wake up and stay woke.
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
But we have too many of our fellow natives, and I've heard that within our own tribe, Jay and Don, that this doesn't concern me. I didn't make these laws. I've heard that all too often, and I'm constantly trying to, inform people that what the lawmakers on Capitol Hill do and what they decide does affect you.
Yes.
And it affects you severely and adversely. So if you're willing to sit back and believe that it doesn't affect you, then you're sorely mistaken, and you're opening yourself up for untold damage. So that's some of the mindset that we as natives have to get rid of. We have to get rid of that mindset, and I'm talking about across the country. I've heard it from countless members of countless tribes. Well, it doesn't involve me. I'm not going to get involved. Yes, it does concern you. It does involve you.
Yeah, because when tribes made treaties with the United States government, there was no Bureau of Indian Affairs. They were put under the War Department as not just wards of the state, but enemies of the state. And if you stepped out of line, then the War Department could come and get you. So,
Jay, one element has been missing here. I agree with they should be doing this at the DMV and the post office and so forth. But I have been on the inside of public employment rather than on the other side of the counter. You add one more task to a public employee's duties, and there's massive, massive rebellion. They don't want to add anything else. Typically, I saw it happen one time, and another member of the judicial said, "Well, what are they going to? They're going to pay me more for doing that?" No, that's just part of your job. But you're missing the fact that they will rebel in a big way about that, and it'll go all the way up the ranks.
Yeah, I know. You're right, Don. You're right. So before we close the show out, Sandra, what do you think? I think we need a part 2 of this, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think once we outside of this session, we come together and we start putting some things down on paper and get our list together, get our itemization things together, then we can certainly have another show. And we want to just continue to share that list and spread it so that everybody knows what we're doing and where they need to be, when they need to go, where they need to be, and whether they need to dress for prison clothes, whatever we need to do to get this thing going.
Well, before I give my closing words, of course, I want to thank everybody that took time out of their busy schedules to be here with us tonight. Secondly, we just keep overlooking something very important that I've been saying for many, many years, and I'm 75 years old. All of us, and I don't give a damn what color you are, what your religious or religion is, or your spiritual persuasion, we're all members of the human family. So the human family need to sit up and listen and stand up and pay attention. And if you don't want to do that, then you need to sit your ass down, because we ain't got time to be carrying people dead weight. Human family is what it's all about. If I need surgery and I need blood, the blood from either of you that have to have my blood type, it will save my life, and vice versa. So, you all need to wake up and smell the coffee, because it's been brewing for over an hour and a half now. We need to start talking about we, us, and ours. Nothing else. We, us, and ours. Not mine, theirs. Damn that. That's a bunch of BS. We put too much emphasis on what we own. We don't own anything, because you came in this world with nothing, and when you leave out of here, you ain't gonna have anything anyway. If you're not willing to give somebody a meal that's hungry, and you know they're hungry, then you need to set your ass down. If you're not willing to give somebody a good word in a time of their depression, then you're not a part of the human family. Set your ass down and get out of the equation. We need people that are going to pay attention to each other and each other's problems and celebrate their good times too, like we did with Sandra tonight. And again, Sandra, happy birthday. But we need to start getting back to being human again. And that's the problem. I got a neighbor that owns what is that stupid car? A Bentley. That don't make you any better than the guy down the street that owns a 1965 Volkswagen that runs good. All of this status symbol stuff is BS, and you know it. If I see a brother walking down the street this winter, and I know I got more than one coat in my closet, and he don't have a coat, I'm gonna go in my closet and give him a coat. That's what the hell it's all about. All that other stuff is BS, and all of you know this. So I'll probably get sanctioned.
Well, it's easy though, Jay. It's easy just for everybody to put into their mind: be kind to one another. Just be kind. We can fight this fight and still be kind to each other.
That's right.
Be cool.
Yeah.
Be cool. And not everybody's a badass bass player, but we do what we can.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
So to all of you tonight, Mark Charles, Don Walker, Gray Owl, Joel Siegel, Pete, to Leslie Fry. And she says, educate yourselves on people's cultures and communities. We may not come from the same culture, and we may not come from the same part of the world, but guess what? When you cry, I cry. When I hurt, and you hurt too. But when I smile in celebration of something, all of us have something to celebrate. So you all need to open your minds. And as Curtis Mayfield used to say, check out your mind. It's been there all the time. I love you all of you. And hopefully I will see you again next week. If the creek don't rise, and if it rises, I can get a bigger paddle on a bigger boat. I love all of you, my brothers and my sisters. And
Me
we'll see you
too, Jay.
again.
Good to be here with everyone, and thank you, Jay and Sandra, for having me on.
You're very welcome, Reverend.
Fight.
See, she's starting trouble.
Look, like Queen Latifah sings, UNITY. That's what we need. And that means between you and Gray Owl too, Jay.
Okay. We got a comment from a brother named Joe Coop. It says, much respect to you all. Farrakhan and J1 and Nightwolf got me paying attention to the weather. I know what he's talking about. 2 years ago, Farrakhan said, we don't need these guns. We don't need these bullets. Just pay attention to the weather because God's got all of this. And if you are not careful, we're all going to disappear because of climate change. And we need to pay attention to the weather, but not only that, we need to pay attention more to each other and each other's problems and find solutions to work them out.
All right, Don, thank you.
Happy birthday, Sandra.
Happy birthday,
Thank
Sandra.
you, Joel. Thank you, everybody.
Nice to
Don-
meet
Thank you.
everybody. Meet everybody.
Pete, Joel,
Thank you.
Rael,
Yep.
Don.
Everybody
Sandra,
have a good evening.
Jay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Take
Take care, everybody.
Charles, take care, man.
Okay, so my closing words are Danada, Goai, Wado. Until we talk again. Take care, Mark.
Bye.
Mark for president.
Yeah.
Yes.